This is Synchronicity.
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 Welcome to episode 23 of Synchronicity. My guest today is co-founder of Myster, Davis Clayton Kiyo. If you remember, last week I had Ben Kovacs on, who's the other co-founder of Meister. Meister is a marijuana lifestyle and accessory company. It's just, check it out, getmeister.com. I'm going to have links to all this on the podcast page. How do you get to the podcast page? There's two ways. One is through syncpodcast.com, SYNC podcast.com. Boom, will be the first thing there. First podcast, super easy to find. Also, you can go to mindpodnetwork.com/Noah, and the first episode will also be there. So that's two places you can go to potentially check it out. Also, on the podcast episode itself, I have links in there too, so you don't even have to go anywhere. So basically, if you want to find out more about anything I'm talking about, I'm trying to make it as easy as possible. So before I get into Davis, I want to recap last week's book giveaway, which was, what did I give away last week? Tribal Leadership, right. And who won that? Let's see here. Renee. Congratulations, Renee. So I hope you enjoy the book. That'll be sending that out today. This week's book giveaway, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I will tell you, but this week's book giveaway is by Carl Jung, Man and His Symbols. One of my favorite books of all time. Admittedly, also one of the densest books. It's probably one of the least dense Carl Jung books. It's also not exclusively written by him. There's other takes on it from some of his disciples and people he taught. But I love it. Gives a fantastic introduction / general overview with some specificity about Carl Jung's kind of ideas relating to archetypes, symbols, so many other fucking awesome stuff. Carl Jung. I mean, the podcast is named Synchronicity because of Carl Jung. So that's this week's book giveaway. Again, all you do to enter this, it's really easy. syncpodcast.com, SYNC podcast.com. On the right side, at the bottom of every post, there's going to be something that says, hey, you want to join the Synchronicity? It's the second week in a row I've done that. Synchronicity. Hey, you want to join the Synchronicity podcast? Put in your email. And what that means is you'll be getting weekly updates on the show, weekly updates about the guests, and cool stuff like being entered in book giveaways where if you just put in your email, you have a random shot of winning that week's book and I send it to you. Brand new book. It's not like I'm reading these used books and sending them to you. Oh, that would be cool too. It's just more of a hassle for me to go to the post office or wherever. I just send it from Amazon right to your door. So if you want to partake in those, there you go. That's all you have to do. I'm going to start talking about this less and less as time goes on. This isn't really as much of a promotional thing here as I just want to create something cool. I feel like if I listen to a podcast and someone's like, hey, I really like this book and I like that person, I'd be like, I would like that book. And I'm just trying to eliminate one of those steps, plus trying to give you some info at the same time. So I'm looking at it as a win-win. So Davis, this was an in-person podcast, right? I've spoken about this before, and I was actually having a conversation about this with Michael Donovan, who has his own podcast, Walking Home, which I highly recommend you check out. And he was saying, listen, Noah, you shouldn't do the Skype podcasts. They're not as good. And I don't necessarily agree that they're not as good, but I do know what he's talking about. And what he's talking about is just kind of there's something to be said when you're in physical space, sharing physical space with someone, and the dynamic and the alchemy that kind of comes out of that. So I have noticed this myself. The in-person podcasts seem to be a little bit different qualitatively. Not better necessarily, but definitely different in a way that I actually enjoy more. So maybe better for me. But this was an in-person podcast, and I think you'll hear some of that kind of come out, what I'm talking about in this particular episode. So Davis is a really interesting guy, and we talk about a lot of different stuff. We're both from the Washington, D.C. area. Also, right off the bat, you'll hear him. Davis talks about his parents are Donald Trump supporters. He himself is a Bernie Sanders supporter. So that was fascinating to me, and hearing him talk about it and kind of, he gets to ask his parents, like, why do you support Donald Trump? It's an amazing opportunity for insight and learning. In general, we talk about the bringing more awareness into our lives, right? Trying to learn more about other people and other things, which then allows you to potentially engage with it in a more beneficial way. Maybe not so judgy, I think, is what kind of came out of that little piece. We talk about the pros and cons of marijuana use. I'll be honest, most of the things we speak about are pros, but we absolutely acknowledge the shadow side to marijuana as well. So Davis asks me about, how would you hack the voter system? And it was like a novel concept, and I was debating the merits of even trying to do something like that and logistically, but I didn't have a great answer for him then. But I feel like a thought occurred to me as I was taking a walk the other day and was seeing political science, like, why don't all of the Democrats, like the DNC, this could apply for either party, but if you're Democratic leadership, what I would say is, hey guys who like us and are inclined to vote for us, for all the primaries, register as the opposite party. So if you're a Democrat, register as Republican. If you're a Republican, register as Democrat. I mean, this is getting pretty chaotic here, but follow my logic. If you register for a party you disagree with on almost everything, you can if enough people did this, you could influence the results of those primaries. So you could pick someone, it seems like it would be Donald Trump, but I have no fucking idea what's going on there. I have some idea, but I haven't really totally figured out, because to me, to be able to pull the trigger on someone like Donald Trump, I don't know. But what I'm saying is like, if you got everyone from your party, your constituents, to join the primaries, because in the general you can still vote for whoever you want, right? There's no law that says if you're a registered Democrat or a registered Republican you can't vote for the other people. That would be illegal. So you can do whatever you want. Yeah, sure, maybe we get weird emails and mail from stuff you don't really care about, but still, that to me is an interesting concept. So I'm encouraging everyone to do that for the next election cycle. Register with whatever party you don't like for the primaries, and just try to know who the really just totally people who are not going to win. I recognize the inherent danger of what if that person is so bad and then they actually win because you did it. But I feel like it is enough people. Like, if enough people did this is a potentially interesting thing people could do. So I'm obviously half joking about that. What are some other things me and Davis talk about? I'm going to wrap it up. I'm not trying to ramble on here. But we talk about, he is of the opinion that everything is theoretically knowable, and it's very empirical, science-based. Like, things that we describe as magic are just stuff we don't understand yet, which is, there's a famous quote of someone, I forget who it is, who was like, if people saw technology from 100 years in the future, they would think that's magic. That would be magic to them. So we talk a little bit about that, talk a little bit about spirituality. He talks about an experience that was relayed to him by a friend's father, a near-death experience, which kind of put a different or an interesting color on how he views death and reality. And he also just talks about a general open-mindedness, and we kind of close on changing reality with your thoughts, which to me is, I don't mean that necessarily in an esoteric kind of, nebulous way. I really do believe that there is an interplay between what goes on in our psyches and in our heads and outside in reality, and not in the way that, like, hey, I'm going to pick up this lighter and that is a thought that is influencing reality. I think actually changing things in another kind of more subtle way. I believe in that. So we kind of close on that. Is that it? I think that's it, right? I don't think you guys want to hear me ramble on too much. That's the second time I've used ramble on. I'm now very self-conscious of it. But yeah, that's all I got. Thank you to everyone who is rating and reviewing. I know I harp on that. I think I've mentioned this in every episode. I don't, I was thinking, like, why am I asking people to do this? And I don't want to get too meta or self-analytical here. I just got to say, it feels I love reading when people say nice and thoughtful things about me. Is that narcissistic? Probably, but I bet you do too, right? No one doesn't ever want to hear something nice about themselves. So I really appreciate those of you who have taken the time to do that. It means a lot. That's it. Now it's officially it. Without further ado, Davis Clayton Kiyo. What were we just talking about that was super... Oh, yeah, politics.
Yes.
So what were you saying about Bernie Sanders, though?
I mean, dude, of course, I'm super into Bernie, right? Just like you were saying, you're into Bernie. And it's disappointing to me when I mentioned it to you that you just completely think it's not possible he's going to win. Yeah.
And all things, since the last time I was having a conversation about this on a podcast, Bernie Sanders hadn't won Michigan yet. But I think we were talking about, you were saying, like, how do you hack the vote system, right?
Yeah,
saying,
not in a legal way, but like just hack.
Yeah, like how
engagement. Like how do you basically how do you pay people to vote without paying people to vote?
And then I said
them with like something, like a
right. I was like, they do that. Bernie Sanders' campaign is doing that really, really well, and he's getting a ton, so many individual people donating, like not huge amounts, like realistic amounts, like something you and I would donate. But then I was like, yeah, but you have one guy on any side who's like a billionaire and is like, here's $200 million, like that kind of defeat. And that's, I think, kind of how everyone feels, which is ironic because
but
that's
dude,
how.
Why does he even need money? Why?
That's a good question.
But like, because dude, the way the internet it is now, right? Like it can't. It's not expensive to campaign in a lot of ways, other than actually winning the nomination, right?
So,
winning the Democratic nomination.
The question, I guess, is what makes someone vote? And I'm realizing in myself, it's when someone says something or seems to be a way that resonates with that person, and that's very vague. But it's clearly some connection that is made maybe through policy choices, but I don't think that's what it is. I was giving the example of I have a relative who's incredibly smart. She's so smart. And she was saying that she was voting for Hillary essentially on the because if a woman was elected president, that would be a representative of 100% of the people. And it really made me stop and think. And I was like, holy shit, you know what? That's like a very valid point, regardless of my personal feelings or political feelings about Hillary Clinton. But it also gave me a pause because she's incredibly smart. And I just fundamentally disagree. And I think Bernie speaks more to what I'm saying. So I guess when you're talking about hacking it, is how do you get people to resonate with a certain thing?
Even back to like, somebody being so smart, being into like something that you are surprised.
Yes.
I said this a couple times, but both of my parents, I love them. They're also very smart, but they are Trump supporters, man. It blows my mind. It's like I can't. I can't believe it, man. Like, and it's like a mind fuck to me in a lot of ways that they actually are into him.
But what do they say about?
Of course, the classic shit. Like, he says what he means, and dude, he's very entertaining and he's really likable. Like, I like him in a lot of ways.
Yes, I understand that aspect. I too, and I would be lying if I haven't put on the debates. Like, I would put on like a sports game and be like, yeah, nice hit, nice hit. I get that.
The Republican debates have been like straight up.
The last one was boring.
Well, yeah, I didn't even watch the last one. But
was
the two ones before that
all
were
of them
crazy.
When he's talking about his dick, like openly.
No, it's amazing.
That's the entertainment value of it. So the question is, we got a whiny dog, Maceo. Don't ruin it.
Hold
on.
Is it he or she?
He's a he, but he acts like a she sometimes, which is, he's an androgynous, coddled only child at this point. Little does he know he has a brother going.
He's cool. He's cool.
Yeah. So to the politics stuff. So we're talking about what would motivate or make someone resonate. I mean, then it becomes the question is like, obviously a lot of people like Donald Trump or Ted Cruz because of kind of what it seems like they stand for, and some of that could just be like speaking their mind, speaking what they believe in. But I think also another, like, why do your parents like Trump?
I mean, I haven't gotten really deep into the conversation with them because it's like I just kind of throw my hands up, truthfully. I haven't really like asked them completely, but they're Republicans altogether. They've always been Republicans. They love Bush. I mean, they still love
So it's just support whoever's leading in the party, or?
I feel like that. Yeah. I mean, dude, there's a big disconnect. Like, it's funny, my family, I've got 3 younger sisters and me, and like, we're all, my 3 younger sisters, like, we're all potheads. We all are
Right.
Democrats, a lot are liberal in a lot of ways,
Right.
Especially socially. And like, it's always been a thing. Like, you know, my parents both still, you know, straight up don't think that gays should have marriage rights. You know, like
Right.
I can't
Why do you
understand
think that is, though? Do you think do they know? Like, I was reading something or
They're not
listening to
religious,
something.
really. They're not like super
Well,
religious.
I forget what it was, but it was basically saying that the reason that people are capable of disliking or not believing in other people's like kind of basic stuff like getting married, like it's not a big deal, really. I mean, who cares if someone else wants to do that? And of course, everyone should have the right to do that.
Sure. Of course.
But you know, when you don't know a lot of people, like if you knew 0 black people, right? If you know 0 and like friendly, like you're not a guy you see on the street, but like someone you interact with, or you're friends with, or a girl, it's easy to be like, oh, well, black people are like this, you know, or anyone is like this.
No question.
So the more you get to know people in general, the more you realize that you're fundamentally the same.
That's
so,
that's the point that I've brought up with them
Right.
multiple times. Like you just haven't hung out with a cool gay people,
Right.
Gay person,
Right.
And you know, I remember it happening to me. Like, you know, they're my parents. I grew
Right,
up
of
with
course,
them.
of course.
I remember thinking in my mind, like, gays shouldn't be able to get married because
Right.
I grew up with them, my parents, you know. And then I remember like going out and meetings, like in high school, having gay friends, and like, I'm like, that's just ridiculous. You just realize quickly
Right,
this
they're
is
people,
stupid
and
as hell to be that way.
So that's interesting. So you made the transition. That's a valuable thing to go through in life, any type of transition like that, because it's huge. And I think that aspect of mind, like that capability of being malleable and seeing things in a different way. And then also, I imagine for you, what did it feel like when you didn't think that gay people should be married? Like, was it like just a viewpoint, or was it like, how did that feel?
I mean, dude, it's funny. It's like this is almost something like taboo to admit,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I was young, dude. I'm like, you know, before
Sure.
high school, middle school type shit.
Yeah, and it's more important that you made the transition. Anyway,
Yeah,
so
and you know, to be clear, now I really feel that like one of the main signs of intelligence is the ability to like just totally realize that you have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. Like,
that is.
So like I'm totally wrong all the time and realize that I am, and that's like exciting and awesome, right? So this is a situation right now, but I remember thinking, I guess my parents had got me kind of convinced in the fact like they shouldn't raise children. Right? I remember thinking that, like, because it's weird and like, I mean, this is crazy. I shouldn't even be saying
Sure.
this,
No,
but,
but
like,
I get it.
But I remember thinking that was like the excuse for why they shouldn't be able to get
that was
married.
the rationale.
Yeah. But it's just so dumb. Like,
Well, it doesn't make sense. And it's when you hear like people who are like in like deep religious cults, you know, like in Utah, who are like polygamists and all this other stuff, when they come out, they're like, how could you believe? And like, why? Because they're voluntarily there sometimes. Like there's not like someone forcibly keeping them in at all times. They're like, well, this is how the world was. And like, why didn't you question this? It didn't make sense. Oh, I remember where I got that from. Sean Dunn. A podcast he did with the mime from Cam Girls, one of his movies. She was in like a very deep religious type cult thing, and she's like, and she's incredibly intelligent. You'll hear if you listen to that podcast. I'll have a link to it. But incredibly intelligent. But she's like, logically it stacked up until you started questioning it.
Yeah.
And most people, including myself, like I'm not always questioning everything at every single point. At a certain point, there's kind of a meshing of intuition with it. But if you're constantly being told something, and this is the way the world is, or this is how these people are, like most people don't have a filter to be like, no, I don't think so from jump. Like some people do. Like there's some things that strike you, but that's interesting. That's really interesting. I think this is really important to talk about too, because I'm sure there's millions of people just like you who are raised in cultures or with parents or anything who just doesn't make them bad. They're your parents.
yeah,
you know
of
that better
course,
than anyone.
Of course,
but
they're
don't
not
have
evil.
the same.
They're not. You know, they're
Exactly.
not bad people. They
So
just have a different opinion.
So
you know?
that gives you a particularly unique take on maybe what I'm seeing with a lot of Donald Trump supporters is like, it's so easy to demonize Trump people at this point. Like they're basically calling Trump Hitler, and it's fascism, and there's Nazis and Bernie Sanders things. You know, there's people getting in arguments about who's right and who's wrong, and it's very polarized. It's like hyper polarized.
That's what it is, man. It's a like I've said this before. When let's say you're lost in the woods with a bunch of people, right? And one guy is like dude, well, the stars are like this, and maybe we should go this way, or like, you know, you're like, well, this, like the sun went that way, and he's like trying to figure it out, and he's like wavering back and forth, and then other guy's like, no, it's this way, like knows which way it is, right? Even though he has no idea what the fuck he's talking about. That dude is easier to follow, and like, you know, and portray, like, people are just like, okay, you know, he's confident as shit, he knows where the fuck he's going, we're gonna follow him, like, and that's kind of like Obama, in a lot of ways. I think Obama's problem was that he is always weighing every situation and everybody's
Early
opinion,
on, it
especially
seemed like that.
was, yeah, and
It
like
did.
it comes off like not confident, not masculine, not even intelligent in a lot of ways. Like, I mean, that's a
fascinating.
crazy way to like.
So this is interesting. Masculine and feminine have qualities that are hypersexualized, at least in our culture, right? That they immediately conjure, you know, members of an opposite sex, like males, guys and girls, women and men.
Sure.
But there's qualities that pertain to each of them that I think in balance are very, very useful, but when out of balance in either direction are very, very kind of crazy. And I think culturally what we're experiencing is, I don't know if it's the last vestiges, but kind of the end of what has been almost a 2,000, 3,000, maybe longer period of kind of the masculine energies outweighing the feminine. Like, look in religions, all the big Abrahamic religions, femininity, women have been suppressed, are still suppressed all over the world.
Sure.
You know, and that's still a reality, but slowly in other places like here, they're gaining, you know, in momentum. So what I like to do with this, and this is a good segue for what you do as a business, is I think, and I've said this before, I do think marijuana, since it's the female part of the plant, is a rebalancing, and one of the qualities it can potentially bestow upon consciousness and work with is a receptivity and an open-mindedness and a compassion that has been lacking. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on marijuana, and then maybe you could talk a little bit about, and we had your business partner Ben Kovacs on an earlier podcast, Meister. So if you could talk a little bit about marijuana and its impact on your life.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. So, I mean, I'm like super in love with marijuana. I mean, like or cannabis,
Rick James.
whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I've always loved it. I remember the first time that I actually got high. I mean, it took many times to get high. But the first time I got high, I was just like, excuse me. I was like, you know, this is it. I love this. I was just so comfortable and so into it. And, you know, I've almost, you know, I was like 13 and I've almost smoked basically on a daily basis since then. I quit a couple times for like a month maybe. But yeah, I mean, and I have like I also have like a hatred sometimes of marijuana because sometimes there's negatives and positives to it, but like sometimes I'm like feeling like I'm too dependent on it, and like, you know, you got to be willing to admit that like there is some type of addiction there.
Absolutely.
Because it, you know, it's enjoyable.
Anything you're regularly using on a daily basis should always be examined for addiction qualities.
But on the whole, it's been great, and like, you know, for me, you know, I just was always into weed and like very open with it in high school. I was like known as the guy that like was the weed dude or whatever. And, you know, I got into it. And then, you know, after high school, I got actually indicted by the federal government for conspiracy to smuggle 100 pounds from Canada into Montana when I was like 21 years old. Okay. And that was like a crazy, huge nightmare. It was like, you know, I was facing 10 years. It was like 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Way marijuana was different, you know, like it was like you could really get 7 years, 8 years for that type of shit. You know? Or, you know, at least a couple years, whatever. Now it's like really hard for people to go to jail for a long time. But
that's good.
Basically, I got caught up in this whole thing. Long story short, like spent a shitload of money, got the case completely dropped, like no probation, nothing, completely dropped. Great, awesome, it was awesome. But it made me realize like, whoa, like my life almost got ruined right there. Yeah. And there was 41 people involved with this thing. There's thousands, like this happens to thousands of people. Like people have nice families, have kids, they sell some weed to their friends and they get caught up in a conspiracy and then they get taken away to a box for years. Yeah. That it was just, you really, if you step back and think about it, especially because I believe cannabis is actually good for you.
Yes.
It's
there's medicinal qualities that are proven at this point.
For sure. There's just no arguing with it. There are a shitload of positives. There's negatives too, but there's positives. And I think the positives way outnumber the negatives.
Yeah, absolutely.
But feeling that way, and when you step back and think like that, for to people grow this plant that helps people and give it to people and make money, and also like, and then you're throwing people in a box and like ruining their lives and their families' lives and like this whole system around it. It's a really fucked up thing. Like, it made me realize a long time ago that this isn't just like, this is a huge catastrophic mistake. The prohibition of marijuana is a catastrophic mistake. Like,
Yes.
And it is literally like shaped this whole jail culture and this whole
It's been the foundation of which it's been mass incarceration and for-profit prisons have been built upon.
Yeah.
And I had been, it's expunged off my record now, but I was arrested on upstate Maryland for possession, very small amount of joint. And it wasn't the worst experience. But I saw, because, you know, I had access to good lawyers, that it wasn't a big deal for me. But if I didn't, that would have been a problem. And if I didn't look the way I looked, and I had dreadlocks, and everyone wanted me to cut them off, and I was like, nah, I'm not cutting these off, like an asshole, like an idiot, like truthfully, like because like this guy actually holds your fate in your hands. But truthfully, it is fucked up, and it is a huge cultural problem outside of whatever mystical, financial, other things. Like, this has really been kind of a fucked up pillar upon which our society is built on now. So yeah,
I mean, this is a taboo statement also, but it's literally the worst mistake since slavery. Like, it really, I can't think of a worse mistake, like as like a culture. Like, that's a really weird thing to say in a lot of ways, but
There's other things.
What's worse?
Women not being able to vote. Yeah. Women basically being allowed to be abused and sex slaves. There's worse things. Let's
one of the worst.
It's one of the worst. We don't have to rank the things. There's a lot others probably I don't know about too. We don't know about, but definitely it's fucked up and it's really bad. And for me, it's one of the biggest issues that I can see.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So continue though.
All right. So that's, I guess I got kind of into my relationship, but it made me realize. And then, you know, I was still really into marijuana. I was an entrepreneur, but I wasn't in the marijuana game or anything like that. I opened an eBay consignment store, and then I turned it into a shipping center, and that was like 6-7 years of my life. And then I had this idea for a magnetic rolling tray, right?
Yeah.
So we came out with that. It's called the stash tray, right? It's a magnetic rolling tray. It's got everything you need in one place, blah, blah, blah. But that like started the whole thing. I had this stoner idea to make
we're looking at the stash tray.
Yeah,
on the
all-in-one
table.
rolling tray. So what we did is like I got an engineer. I made a bunch of prototypes. We went through the whole design process and got the finished like final prototype. Made a cool video. Did an Indiegogo. You helped out with that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It was, you know, successful. We funded the production of that, and it made me realize, you know, there's a huge market. There's a huge space in this market for high-end luxury, like well-designed, modern cannabis accessories. I just didn't see anything like that yet. There was no like...
And super functional.
Exactly.
And the tray goes in a book cover too, so it's like easy to put away.
Kind of hide it away.
For spouses or people who like to keep things organized and clean is a very functional use of it.
It's just nice to have like a spot where you know everything
I'm not intentionally pitching the product. I just know that it's actually like there's real thought behind this stuff. But to me, it also just fits into kind of normalizing. The term cannabis culture is a little too zingy for me, but like people who enjoy smoking or ingesting or partaking in cannabis and whatever those effects might be for that person, whether medicinal, consciousness related, not, I think that it's normalizing those types of people that they can be functional and like really bring a lot to the world too.
Yeah, I mean that was
important.
That was really the like statement behind it, is that we wanted to be high end. We wanted to be kind of the opposite of what you see behind the marijuana movement, you know, which is a lot. I mean, you know, it's a lot of hippiness to it, a lot of like, you know, which is fine, but a lot of times, you know, I'm from DC. We're from DC. It's like very snobby here. It's all about like the way you dress, who you know, all this shit, and it's like it's a really snobby culture, and so we kind of. I just see the space there. Like, I know I have a lot of doctors that are customers, lawyers, psychologists, like this is for, you know, people that have money that enjoy cannabis, and there's a shitload of people.
Yeah, I think it's also, I wouldn't even say that you need to have money for this stuff. I think it's just an investment for if you're a regular or ritualistic smoker, this stuff could actually help you. But we're not going to sell the product That's not
anymore. You don't want to talk about it.
No,
anymore.
no, it is. I'm going to have a link to
But
it.
no,
obviously, there's no doubt about it, and I'm in no way saying I don't want to talk about it.
Appreciate it. Yeah,
It is.
But basically, that's what sparked the whole Meister idea.
Absolutely.
Meister high-end accessories. So then we started with just a line of multiple different products. We have a dry herb vaporizer. We've got a vaporizer that looks like a pen. Blah blah blah. We've got like 27 different products right now. So that was the whole idea, is a whole luxury line, a lifestyle brand. But what I'm saying is part of the movement and part of the idea was like, we want to take this out of the shadows. We want you to be proud of your cannabis use and also like show it off instead of it being like a secret thing. It's what I've always been, felt very strongly about it because of what happened with me, the indictment and things like that. But now also the second legal situation that's happened to me and Meister has also made it just like even more important and make a lot more sense behind like why things need to change. Like, so let me get back to that. I mean, whoever's listening to this doesn't know about what happened. But so Meister, we have 2 stores. We had a retail store in Petworth in Washington, D.C., and we used to have a retail store in Bethesda, Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. And we were selling, Meister products and glass. It was like a boutique smoke shop, right? And we were selling CBD oil out of the store, right? And
just non-psychoactive.
Yeah. So to be clear, like CBD oil is made from hemp, right? And it's extracted from hemp, and it really it doesn't get you high. It helps with seizures and anxiety, PTSD.
Yes, medicinal
cravings.
effects only. Not
correct.
Yeah.
I have the documentation. We were getting it labeled and remade from a company in Colorado, that has a USDA certified organic certification for their hemp. I have all the backup to show that it's legal, right?
Right.
So, I was referencing the federal law to like when I did the research before we started selling it.
Yeah.
I checked the federal law, it's legal. I checked Maryland law, marijuana statute, and it's legal.
Right.
I didn't check the Controlled Dangerous Substance Act, right? So what happened was Montgomery County police sent it in undercover, purchased the oil, the CBD oil, took it back to a lab, tested it. It came up positive for THC because all CBD oil contains a minute amount of THC, especially when you extract it from the hemp. It increases the amount of everything, right? It's like more concentrated. So they didn't test the percentage or anything like that.
No,
They're just like, it's positive with THC.
Yes.
They're selling oil. So they like basically treated it as if we were selling wax, like
psychoactive
super
THC,
concentrated
dabbing,
weed oil, right? So they got a search warrant and they came in, they raided the shop. They took all of our inventory, took all of our cash for deposits, detained me and my 2 employees, took away our business license, impounded my employee's car, impounded my employees' laptops, their cell phones, drained both of our business accounts. Like literally went and showed up and took a check made out to Montgomery County Police for the balance of our business accounts. Did the same with my personal account.
Is that legal?
Yeah, it's legal, man. And
it's seizure.
It's a whole seizure thing, and the truth is, it's about to change. Like especially in Maryland, there's a bunch of bills. Like, and there's one bill that just passed that like limits it a lot. Yeah, it's really crazy. Like they literally came and robbed us. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
Government sanctioned robbing.
They just came and robbed us. Instead of, that's the thing. Like I see let me explain too. Under the Controlled Dangerous Substance Act, it's like applies to bath salts and synthetic marijuanas and all these other things. And it also says that you can't sell any oil that contains THC. Right? So unfortunately, in a lot of ways, that contradicts the marijuana statute that says hemp oil is legal and the federal one that says hemp oil is. Yeah, I mean it's debatable, but in my opinion, in my lawyer's opinion, there needs to be a clarification. Like there literally needs to be a change in this law, especially in Maryland.
Well, especially if the intent it's one thing like. To me, and I imagine there's less percentage-wise THC in CBD oil extract than there is alcohol in something like Listerine. My point is that like it's pretty like the intent isn't people can go and drink Listerine if they want to get kind of drunk. It's incredibly unhealthy, and if you're an alcoholic, you may do that, but like you're not going to do that with CBD. Even
the CBD. I mean, every single package has a batch number and a full-on report. Like this
Right.
had a little bit under 3%
Right.
THC in it,
Right.
right? Like we know how much was in it, and
Right.
it's there. So that's what's debatable. Like Montgomery County feels that it's illegal and I broke the law, and then I don't feel that way. So it's an interesting situation right now. They dropped the two. I forgot to mention they charged me with 3 felonies.
Yeah.
They charged my 2 employees, one with with 2 felonies and another with a misdemeanor possession charge. They dropped the felony charges on one of my employees the other day.
Good.
And they're, I assume, going to drop the misdemeanor charge on the other employee.
Right.
That's just like a different schedule in the courts. But they did not drop mine. Like
Right.
they are straight up going to pursue these charges for me, which, has a 5-year possibility sentence.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way that that's going to happen. I mean, I think my lawyer and me, I'm just under the opinion like it's just no way I could get jail time for
Yeah.
this right now. I mean,
Yeah.
if I could, that's crazy. It's
Yeah.
But we're going to fight it. I'm like literally ready to fight it. Not only because I want to get that store open and like I want to start making, it's really hurt me, like it hurt Meister altogether.
Absolutely.
It took a lot of income out of our pockets. It took a lot of inventory. We had just, of course, like a week before, we had literally just like restocked the store with like, we had,
Right.
just an immense amount of inventory
now
in
the
there.
Montgomery County Police Department has a lot of high-end marijuana products.
God, man, it's so frustrating. But at the same time, like, it really hasn't, for a little while I was like super down about it and
Yeah.
like, really fucking frustrated
Of course,
and angry
that's
and
pretty
stressed.
natural.
Yeah. But now I'm kind of turning around where I'm I'm very good at turning things like in my own mind into a positive, but
Sure.
this is legitimate. There's going to be some positive from this. I mean,
Right.
first off, we're going to get press. Like I'm already got a lot of avenues that are interviewing, and I'm going to get a lot of good press out of it. And second off, I think that we can win, and if not, we can at least like cause enough of a ruckus that it actually makes Annapolis, like the Senate, change one of these things. Either they're
Right.
going to decide that they're going to change it to clarify that I
It
was totally
is,
breaking the law,
or isn't.
that I wasn't. And what's great is what's trending right now, not only throughout the world,
Right.
but especially in Montgomery County, Maryland.
Right.
What's trending is
No big.
don't
Yeah.
fuck with weed anymore.
Yeah,
You know,
just
like
not
just
worth
leave it alone. We've already got, to be clear about what's going on in Maryland, medical marijuana is legal.
Yep.
They are going to have 98 dispensaries in Maryland within months, or at
That's a
least
lot.
licenses. That's a lot.
lot for the state of Maryland.
15 grow operations. And there's a recreational bill right now in Annapolis that's got some steam, to actually legalize recreational. So basically, the positive there is that the trend in policy in this area is going in my favor, or in Meister's favor. So we'll see what happens. I mean, basically, right now we're waiting for the state's attorney to come back with an offer, and if the offer involves not being able to open the store again, or me having to plead guilty to a
Not
felony,
gonna do it.
we're going to trial.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Well, I mean, I think from a change standpoint, this could be pretty important because, as you're saying, let's tie 2 things together. The thing we opened with and this. I mean, there's a bill, like you said, in the Maryland Senate.
Yeah. Introduced by David Moon.
Okay.
Who's the
so
man.
we'll have a link to this on the site, on the page too. But how do we get things like that? Do you just call your local representative? Like, how do we enact those things? I feel like, at least in Montgomery County, just from moving, I'd been living in Manhattan for the previous 7 years, moved here in June of 2015. And since being here, there's a good deal of people around my age, young families, a lot of young families, a lot of people who grew up who, in my estimation, from the demographics I hang with, are pretty, whether they smoke marijuana, ingest marijuana, or they're pretty much cool with it. They're not hardline. No, it's it's the devil's weed. Get away from me.
Yeah.
So it seems like naturally, if everyone did have like a button they could push right away and everyone did it at the same time, it would pass, right? That's kind of the general pervasive attitude. But Maryland is also a pretty diverse state.
Yeah.
So what do you think, how do we get people to kind of galvanize for a larger mobilization effort for that?
Man, see, truthfully, I don't know, man.
That's a good answer.
I would
don't
ask
either.
you that question. Like,
Yeah.
and it needs to be it needs to be hacked in some way. And like,
Yeah.
I mean, this is even like a bigger, larger picture. Is that I don't even really know how the law, like what you do to even get that law, the bill passed.
Well, I think the people vote on it.
Yeah,
right? So you probably have to put pressure on people,
delegates to vote.
On delegates,
Right,
to vote. I mean, I think that's pretty much how you do it. Like you have to know that your constituents, the people you're representing, are being heard. So if you get enough people to, you know,
I mean, it's people like me should be, from what I understand, is going down there and testifying, which I am planning on going down and testifying just about what happened with this. Like
Sure.
it's they just need to know what's going on. And but that, from what I understand, because I actually have two friends that work there, like a chief of staff or somebody, and another person that's helping, and they're just like, look, everybody here is like for weed, basically.
Yeah.
Like
Why wouldn't they be?
Except for a couple people.
Yeah.
So it's.
What do you think the moral, disagreements or objections is the word I was looking for against cannabis and marijuana are? Like, because those are, it's kind of like at this point, Trump.
I don't know of a legitimate one. I mean, I can't.
Your parents, are they cool with
No,
it?
they're cool with it. I mean,
Well,
they don't
yeah.
like really. I mean, at this point, that's a funny thing too. Is that like
because they know someone who now
they were super like. When I got indicted, it was like a whole, especially on the family level and social level, like in a huge embarrassment for them.
Of course, I'm sure.
And that's bullshit that it has to be that way. But so that was like crazy to see. That's a funny part of my story. Is basically like I was the weed guy in a negative way, and now that Meister is like successful and has respect and is like big in the industry around the world, now I'm like the weed guy in a positive way to my parents.
Yes,
like they literally are proud of it.
Yes, that's that's cool.
It's just interesting. That took 10 years to happen, but it's happening very fast. Like where that's just like it shows like a little microcosm of the change in people's opinions.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting. I think all of this is centering kind of around normalizing certain aspects. And different things to people. I'm hoping.
I'm sorry.
No.
What's a legitimate argument for the continued prohibition of cannabis?
That a legitimate one. This is hard because I'm obviously a big proponent of making it legal. I guess one of them. I mean, I'm literally the worst person to ask.
I mean,
because
I am too. You just asked me. I threw back the same kind of question to you.
A
actually,
hypothetical.
I can't think of one.
I'm trying to think of a hypothetical reason why someone wouldn't like. Well, maybe they think that it creates in the general population lazy behavior, or people can't handle it. And I will say this.
That's true.
Now I will say this.
Kind of true.
I know a lot of people who smoke weed in various different ways, some of them very irregularly, some of them regularly, and some people can function very well, and it can help them, and it can be any number of things in a positive way. And it can also be a negative thing for a lot of those people too. But then I know some people, like, they cannot. Yeah. That is bad for them. You can see for whatever reason, whether it makes them anxious or tired or they don't want to do whatever it is, it's not. So maybe that children who now see something as akin to cigarettes, which technically you're not supposed to smoke till you're 18, but come on, high school is middle school. Kids are smoking cigarettes, guys. So I think making it so normalized, like almost more normalized than alcohol in a lot of ways, because alcohol, it's clear, like, don't drink and drive. Like, you can't do this as well, so don't do it. Marijuana is a funny little line there. Some people will say when they smoke weed that they're better drivers. If anything, they go too slow. They're too cautious.
That's definitely what happens.
So the thing is it's a murky area, which the public and general people who don't understand something are going to have a difficult time with, right? It's like not like easy. Oh, okay, cut and dry. Some people, like, I smoked weed once and I freaked the fuck out, and that's what everyone's doing. They're just crazy people.
There's one thing too about like the first time you get high. I mean, the first time I got high, it was like psychedelic. I had visuals. I got visuals, from it. I remember, and gravity was all fucked up. And so for people that like only smoke a couple times, they're like, whoa, like I can't imagine driving. I can't imagine driving or functioning, working during the day. Right. But there is no question that there's negatives to it, man. Like I know, I've said it before, like the positives outweigh the negatives for me, but there's definitely like a motivation, an organizational thing, a memory thing for sure, man. Like that it fucks with your short-term memory. Like at least for me, least for me. Dream, like
dream suppressant,
yeah.
big time dream. One of
When
my
I don't
least favorite things about marijuana is big time dream suppressant.
For real, it's so true, and that's what when you quit for a couple days, that's the first thing you
they
notice.
flood
man.
back, and you're like, oh my god, there's a
Boom.
whole other world here.
Yeah, and then there's really, and even for me, especially recently, like the munchies aspect has really been getting me.
This is what Ben mentioned too.
Yeah, man, it's like
I wonder if the munchies sometimes also. There's two aspects to the munchies. One is I think a lot of people think the food or whatever you're eating just tastes really good.
Yeah.
And then there's also the craving. I think the craving is just exacerbated. I think the craving's already there, but when you smoke marijuana or ingest marijuana, it just accentuates it. So you act on it more. Because I think the munchies are just like akin to something like emotional eating, like stress eating.
there's something I don't want to sound dumb, but like there's something about THC. I've read this somewhere that shuts off the sensor that tells you you're full, basically, or like that your stomach is full. I remember reading that somewhere legitimate, but that would make a lot make a lot of sense, right? Like because I know I've like been full and smoked some weed, and then I'm hungry again.
For sure. For sure.
But yeah, man, it's still it's been. I mean, what's funny to me, man, like, if you were to, when you just said, we're talking about like legitimate reasons for the prohibition, like if you were really to step back and choose, if you had to choose between having legal recreational alcohol or legal recreational marijuana,
sure,
it would have to be marijuana. Like alcohol is so much more dangerous.
Right? But
it's so crazy.
But it's not. It's not even close. No, I mean, we're totally in agreement, but I'm just saying it's not even a question that in society today, if you tried to do a prohibition with booze.
Oh yeah, no way.
It's
not happening. I'm not proposing that we do that.
My point is that I think we may be saying that it's like maybe an education thing, but I don't know how you go about convincing people who have been taught their whole lives and have never met anyone who is capable or enjoys marijuana, is also productive, or maybe people know that, but it's still under the table. Like gay people still had to be in the closet in this country up until fairly recently in recorded history.
That's, even bringing it back, like when you're making an argument to somebody that doesn't agree that gays should have the right to be married, right? It's very similar. Like, look, fine, if you think it's religious wrong or you think it's gross, whatever, but you just don't have a right to tell people what they can't do like that. And that applies to smoking marijuana. Like
this is like, what about psychedelics? Where does that fall on the spectrum for you?
I mean, personally, I think it should be totally legal.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all drugs should be legal.
Heroin too, and everything. Yeah,
I really do, man. I mean,
what about the potential ramifications? Now we at least have we can hypothetically imagine what someone's argument would be. What about like the cultural ramifications of legalizing all drugs in a society as large as the United States? I mean, there could be potential. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah. There's no question. I mean, I don't know. I just don't like the idea of like choosing a line. A line like, oh, this is good. Like Oxycontin's okay.
It's libertarian.
But this is not okay. Like this, I feel like
I see. And here's the thing. You know what? And I think Oxycontin and I think opioids are one of the biggest scourges of the earth. Not like something like opium, but I think like the painkillers, the scientifically engineered thing. Watch Oxyana by Sean Dunnigan.
Yeah,
watch that. I mean, it is like, it's devastating communities and people.
Problem,
I mean, I think I forget where it falls in percentage wise. It's an astoundingly large percentage of young people dying of drug overdoses in the past 10 years, like really creepily high. So that to me, I mean, you compare that to something like, marijuana, cannabis, and it's like a no-brainer, but then that means that there's something else going on, right? And that something else could just be as simple as the dichotomy of like the political thing, right? Like, well, Bernie Sanders, people see the corporations and Wall Street having fucked everyone over and all these things, and they agree with that. But then there's people on the Republican side, Cruz, Rubio, I mean, they all agree with this, and Trump in most of the ways too, that those aren't the issues. The issues are as illegal immigrants and all these other things, and Planned Parenthood, all this other stuff. So how do you convince people, or how does the culture kind of shift its mindset? To me, it was a natural proliferation. I think as more people smoke marijuana or ingest marijuana, and the more people know people who do it or do it themselves in some way and realize it's maybe not the worst thing in the world, it changes. But then I think there's that other step of when does it actually reach the tipping point? And it's like, okay, now it's legal in every state now, and we have a economy, and I think, imagine the economic potential boons that could happen from this that could be used for educational initiatives, any number of things.
Right now, the U.S., we grow the best weed, man, in the world.
Yeah.
It's like, Germans make great beer. We grow the best weed. We should just
know it?
embrace it and
Yeah.
like straight up start exporting it to countries that want to legalize it too. I mean, that's even more far fetched. But like, it's gonna. I think it's gonna be there one day. I mean, I definitely.
What do you think in terms of time frame?
I mean, it's totally a guess, man. But I would like to think that within 5 years we're gonna be federally, recreationally legal. I know that's crazy, but I would like to think that, man. I think that the way that communication is so open and issues are moving so fast and changing so fast based on like the way that we can, example, like remember when Obama was like about to bomb Syria and everybody was just like, no, dude, don't do that.
Yeah.
Like that is a crazy example of how the internet and like the free communication and the level of like the effectiveness of that communication.
Do we know that was a direct cause and effect though? It could have been some.
I mean, it was just like a whole opinion. Everybody was just he got up and said he was going to do it, right?
Yeah.
Like they crossed the line that I set, and now I'm going to do it, and then everybody was like, no, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember exactly what happened, but it's just an example of how things are moving so fast because.
Well, no, that's technology, right? If nothing else, technology has enabled light speed, literally communication between people and thoughts and ideas. So your question, how to hack these things?
It
right?
Technology reduces the effectiveness of propaganda, right? Like you can't even get away with propaganda.
And crazy.
Oh, I guess you're
both.
Right. Yeah,
So here's the thing
right.
about technology that I think is my take on it at this point is I think it's inherently neutral. I think as most things in this world, intent and intention have a lot to do with how things are used. And that is ultimately what will proliferate, not only on the internet, but also just in your immediate world, whatever's going on around you, what you think is what you become and what happens around you. Like that's how it works. And, some people, if you can tap into that, you can really enact some change in a lot of different ways, but technology definitely allows that. So let me ask you, kind of shifting gears a little bit.
Sure.
What do you consider yourself, and I know this is somewhat vague and purposely so, do you consider yourself like a spiritual person or someone who has spiritual, resonances with anything?
I wouldn't consider myself necessarily spiritual, but I consider myself like believing a lot in science. I'll put behind it. Like, I don't believe in magic. I don't believe in like mythical, spiritual in that way.
I love it.
I believe that it's all. I mean, I believe that it is magic to us.
Yes.
But we just don't understand the science behind it.
Okay.
Right. So like everything, religion, afterlife, whatever happens to you when you die, vibes.
There's laws dictating.
And we're just way too stupid to understand it at all. But I don't think there's anything magical about it.
That's very, very. It's like a very. I totally get that, and I think there's a lot of elements of Buddhism I think you would really like.
Yeah, I mean that's how I got to that point. Truthfully,
Yeah.
I went to I went to Thailand for like 8 weeks
very
and
cool.
rode around to temples and like met with
cool.
Buddhists.
Thai Buddhists,
and like
very cool.
And really talked through it because Buddhism was always the one religion that I saw being somewhat logical,
Yes.
that I actually was like, maybe this is onto something. Like I was raised Catholic,
Sure.
Sunday school,
Sure.
all into that, and I get it, and I'm not, I don't think the Catholic Church is evil or whatever, or maybe in some ways maybe it is, but that's horrible to say. But like, I don't think it's evil, or I think it's a great thing.
Evil,
It's a great. No, truthfully, it's good altogether. It's great, right?
Sure.
There's like the whole pedophile situation that sucks. Whatever. I'm getting off on a tangent, but I don't believe it. I don't believe in the Bible.
As a literal thing.
It doesn't
that
make
happened.
sense to me. Like it doesn't. It sounds like stories that were made up over. I mean, maybe I'm not saying things didn't happen.
I totally get it. You're not
Yeah.
offending me, and I highly doubt
I hope
any
I'm not
of our
offending
listeners.
anybody.
I don't think you're offending listeners by saying that. I mean,
But
even
truthfully,
if
whatever. If you're offended, that doesn't like what. That's crazy. Like you have to be
someone
open-minded like
maybe
that.
believes. I mean, I don't know word for word. I mean, my conception of the Bible, and here's the truth. Here's the flat, honest truth. I've never read the Bible cover to cover. I've read things about it. I've read breakdowns. I've read aspects of it and parts of it.
Sure.
But I've never read the whole thing. Even the Old Testament, I've never read the whole thing. I'm Jewish.
Yeah.
Should have some idea. But you can look at them in a bunch of different ways. You can look at them as kind of allegories or metaphors for things that we encounter in life. You can also realize that a lot of these things were definitely written by people.
Yeah, of course.
Whether they come from the direct word of God or whatever people want to say, that's another question. But people wrote these down.
Sure.
And when people write things down, sometimes things can get lost in translation.
Yeah.
And also just from experiencing things like peak experiences, if anyone's in psychedelics, trying to translate that into words sometimes, not so easy. So there could be some non-literal things that are taking place. But I think, I look at stories like the Ramayana, which I know is the wrong pronunciation of it, but the Hindu epic, it's one of the foundational, scriptures of Vedic, the Vedas. And it's very important for Hindus. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of stories there. I do believe those things exist, not in this world. I think the imaginary worlds, the dream worlds, other dimensions of consciousness are equally as valid as the one we're in.
Agreed.
I agree that the scientific model or empirical model could potentially explain almost everything that happens in the universe. Mm-hmm. But I think it's also explained simply by kind of the law of karma, which is the very chunked down version of it, cause and effect.
But that's the thing. I got off on a tangent about Catholicism, but Buddhism. That's where I got lost in Buddhism. Like I was really when I started reading into it, and then I started reading some of the laws, or I don't know what they're called, rules. I don't remember. Truth. Excuse me. And it was like if you're this percentage enlightened, this happens. And then they got into all these crazy details. And I'm like, no, you don't know that. Like nobody knows that.
There's a lot of lists, and then there's a lot of different types of Buddhism, and there's a lot of different interpretations and lists. Buddhists have famously lists upon lists upon lists and subsets. But it is very much
open.
The Dalai Lama famously says, if science proves any aspect of what we believe wrong, we'll change it.
Yeah.
And he says that tongue in cheek though. He says that knowing that the inner exploration that people have been doing, at least in the Buddhist traditions, Tibetan Buddhism, they know things that maybe other people don't know by directly physically observing. So the question is this, I guess. I don't know if I probably do believe in magic, but only because there's who said it? There's a famous saying that technology 100 years in the future would look like magic to us now, right? That's another saying on things, and that could be very true. If you took to inflate that a little bit, if you took an iPhone back, 600 years, you're a witch. You're a witch. Bye bye. You're getting burned at the stake. So I get that aspect of it, but I do think there are things that we don't experience through a regular filter of consciousness that are equally as valid, and in some ways may actually even dictate more of what goes on around us than what we consciously perceive, which puts us in a kind of precarious position of, when do we know what to believe? How do we know this is valid? Because there's examples, I think, in everyone's lives. I think there was one report, I forget what it is, but it was 75% of people or 80% of people reported mystical experiences.
Sure.
Things that they could not account for in regular Newtonian physics, or even now the emergent fields of quantum physics, which is still quantum physics is still physics.
That's what it, everything that you're saying, I basically agree.
Yeah.
I agree with. It's just the over-encompassing thing behind it is that it's all science and quantum physics that we don't understand. In my opinion, even karma,
absolutely,
all this stuff is, that's the only difference we have in opinion, is that I think it's more scientific. So you think there's a possibility for
how
more
did those emergent properties kind of come to be in your conception? And this isn't a right or wrong answer, so I'm interested.
Also, I don't know shit. Especially
that's good.
That's
better
the first
than
thing I
thinking
admit.
You know stuff and then saying, that open-mindedness is a famous Zen thing. I think it was Suzuki Roshi, or was it Ajahn? It was someone. Name's not important, but it was don't know mind. Don't know mind.
Yeah.
Beginner's mind. It was Suzuki Roshi. Beginner's mind. Totally like a child sees the world. You're not presuming anything. So that's good. That's a good quality to have.
What made me get there, kind of?
Yeah, there must be
the trip, when I started looking into it and I saw the specifics, the specifics, that's what I don't like. I don't like when religion tells you something that's so specific.
Dogmatic.
Yeah, that it's just like, dude, nobody knows that. That like discounts everything. So that's where I kind of got lost in like the full on Buddhist side of it. But I still just think I think that the truth, like karma, totally exists. I think reincarnation is definitely possible, and I think that like I don't discount that at all. But it's also possible you just die or you shut off. But you know, let me tell you the story. This is an interesting story. All right, ready? All right. So my friend's father, a really good friend of mine, in middle school, was like basically like my second father. He's definitely like a mentor in a lot of ways. Like I hung out there a lot and whatever. Became real close. And he was in he had like a grenade blow up. He jumped on a grenade, right? And he in war, right? Jumped on a grenade and he died for a little while, right? And I used to always bug him about that and be like, yo, what happened when you died? What happened when you died? And one time he told me, he was like, look, and he got like real serious about it. Like, and he was like, look, like don't, I don't know what your parents, like don't tell your parents this. Like it changes things. It's like different about religion, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And what he said was this, right? Everything went black. He floated towards the cliche light, right? He became a part of the light, right? He was everywhere at once. He felt the most comfortable he had ever felt.
Right.
He knew everything and knew everyone, right? And time didn't exist.
Yeah.
And then he came back, right? And that's like basically like what I word for word remember. I know he added a lot of other things, like the feeling. He drew a stick figure on a piece of paper, and then he said like, he like took it and like cut it out and folded it up, right, to make it like 3D or pop up, basically like a pop up book. And he was like, look, like this is what it felt like. I was coming from the stick figure and going and becoming the 3D pop up, like into another dimension you don't understand, right? So that was like,
do you believe
that happens?
Believe him?
I fucking really believe him. I really really trusted him, and I still trust him. Like and like also I trust him enough that like why would you ever tell somebody that if it wasn't fucking true? Exactly. And the thing is that it could be a hallucination. It could be DMT. It could be fucking DMT.
Sure, being released in your brain when you die, and then that's what you experience.
That doesn't say anything really, but I believe that's what happens.
So
I do.
That is a common shared experience from near-death experiences, and also in Buddhism they talk. I believe that's referred to that white light is the clear light of awareness, and if you can recognize it, and this is why I love Tibetan Buddhism because they really do. Break it down, but it doesn't have to be so like nerdy, or it doesn't have to rub you the wrong way. And one way of engaging with Buddhism and all their lists and stuff is reading and investigating stuff that seems to make sense to you on some level, and also taking it with kind of a grain of salt. If it's not resonating, you don't have to be like, oh, well, these people.
Sure.
But they talk about in Tibetan Buddhism being able to recognize that clear light, and you get many actually opportunities to do it before you reincarnate into cyclic existence, which is what they believe the human world is one element of that. And that's a very, very and training essentially what people do, and they train for their lives in many different ways, is to be able to recognize that light and understand what it is, and not actually take future birth, or if they are going to take a future birth, take what's known as the Bodhisattva's vow, which is to reincarnate for the benefit of other people. You'll stave off your enlightenment, the merging with that and whatever that is to the Buddha realms, whatever it is, for the benefit of all other sentient beings, which is part of the Bodhisattva's vow. But it's interesting that these things kind of line up a lot. And to me, that's why I'm fascinated in some particular paths to it, but I'm more interested how everything kind of lines up. Like the fact that you can have some guy who's in the war, jump on a grenade, die, have a very similar experience to what's been written down for tens of thousands of years, thousands of years at least, is pretty remarkable to me.
Yeah.
And I think I also try to cultivate the skill you're talking about, which is not thinking I know everything. And that is really been very useful.
I've become, especially the last like 10 years, I've become really like way more open to possibilities.
Why?
it's just a feeling, dude. I'm starting to like. I mean, do you? I really like legitimately believe I can change things with my thoughts. You know,
Sure.
and I like the secret kind of stuff, like what they talk
Sure.
about. Like I think that there is something to.
So what
that.
do you think that is? That's the interplay of psyche and matter. I've talked about that a lot on this. I have a book right there. It's one of the most interesting things to me.
It's the same thing. I don't understand it, and I think that like I have no idea, but I don't think it's. I still don't think it's magic, but there's something
Well,
like
I
there's
see.
something
I see.
about it, like and
it's not magic in that sense. I totally get it.
but that's what really started to open my mind to like when I started to believe that idea that you can change things with your thoughts by thinking positively and manifesting things. And I also I like waver between like thinking how crazy that can be, like what you can do. But I've like, you know, I it's hard for me to concentrate and hard for me to get certain things done. But I know that like when I want something to happen, it fucking
focus
happens.
on it,
Like it's happening, you know, like,
Yes.
And so whether that's magic or whatever, but that like opened my mind to, you know, and then also the double slit experiment.
Yeah,
That
one of my favorite experiences.
Totally, like I was like, all right, like we have no fucking clue what's going on.
It just flipped the entire paradigm of what physics is. The double slit is the principle essentially that emerged from there is that by observing a light go through a double slit, it could emerge as either a particle or a wave, depending on what the observer was looking for.
Depending if it was being observed, right?
Observed,
like
right.
if you were looking at it, it would do something. If you were filming it, it would do something. But if nobody was looking at it or
Yeah.
it wasn't being filmed, it would do something different.
Yeah, it basically shows that there's the quantum indeterminacy, which is we don't exactly know what's happening at a very small level.
It means that protons
Planck
are conscious.
levels. Yeah,
basically.
Well,
like
what's fascinating to me on the quantum, if you want to take it to another little weird place, is that the Planck level, right? 1/1000th of an inch is what is being defined as quantum, right? Below that, that's what they're observing is below 1/1000th of an inch. That's where all this weird shit starts to happen. That is the gap in between our neural synapses where neurotransmitters are. So that's like where everything is being quantumly, you know what I mean? That's the quantum world. So we live in this big world, us gigantic people compared to the quantum things, but our consciousness, or in our brains at least, is actually functioning on a quantum level, which is pretty nuts, and I think does support the interplay of psyche and matter. I guess magic is you're defining it as something that you don't understand, that we don't understand, so it looks magical to us. Magic it's a broad word, but I mean, it can mean anything from ritual magic. So trying to do exactly what you're talking about, like spells and things like that, incantations, even alchemy,
Making
what people
things
went
by-
into, like
with
it
your
is,
thoughts.
you know, it is doing these ritualistic behaviors and, you know, whether to gods or to energies or to whatever, to enact change in the world. Think of simple, super simple example, rain dance, Native American rain dance, right? Like, shouldn't necessarily have anything to do with anything. If you're doing a dance, should it rain? But you know what? We wiped those people out. Not we, but this civilization that lives here now, wiped out the Native Americans. And they had a lot to offer. The Lakota were incredibly wise, you know, so I think what's interesting now is with technology and people, I am looking for the fundamental balancing of the technological revolution and where we're going there, but also remembering there's a whole aspect of the world that we can't technologically influence just by virtue of technology. Maybe we will. Maybe the singularity happens. Maybe we merge and robots are the new form of consciousness that's predominant and they teach us the way. Like, who knows? But I do think there's so many things we don't understand about the world we live in and what we perceive that it's important to try to investigate. That's what this podcast basically is. This touching on it here kind of at the end. But that's essentially what we're trying to figure out collectively is, you know, what the fuck is going on and, you know, what are people's different perspectives? Because that's, You
mentioned technology, of course, right? So I personally am like super, especially recently, like the last 6 months, super overwhelmed and stressed by the constant communication that I'm stuck with all the time, right? It's becoming like just like a downer, basically, like that.
It's a time suck.
And it's not like a popularity thing. I guess I'm an entrepreneur, like whatever. I just like I have so many communications and so many notifications, like constantly all day, that it's starting to fucking drain on me, man. You know, and I feel like it's happening to a lot of people. You know, like
priorities in life. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do a lot of different things in the world. Running a business and scaling up a business can potentially create an influx of information. However, I mean, there's simple things, you know, that people like Tim Ferriss recommend. The 4 hour, that stuff, gating your time, automating a lot of things that are still allowing it to be personal, but still, you know, prioritizing things.
I got to reread 4
It's
Hour
good.
Work
I
Week
mean,
again.
I took a few concepts out of there. What I really was the biggest key takeaway, and I think what he tapped into with the 4 Hour Work Week, which was great, which is this idea of kind of cultivating the type of life that you want to have. And whatever those priorities are, is setting those as kind of the goal and then shaping everything around that. In terms of the sheer amount of information, just make sure you're doing other stuff. You know what I mean? Like, make sure you have other outlets and things to do.
It's an issue with me. Like I'm starting to admit now, like my addiction to social media altogether, right? I straight up have an addiction to social media. And for me, it's like super hard because I post something on Instagram, like a really good video, and then I see the sales come in. You know? So it's like
there's a reason.
It's like
there's a reason.
I have a right to be addicted to it. It's fucking exciting and it's cool, but it can't just rule your life. In a lot of ways, like, I mean, you can delegate things and all this stuff, but
you don't overshadow that. Delegating is very important.
That's what I got to do. I have to give up social media for my company, at least eventually.
As someone who worked with a lot of clients doing social media for the day-to-day management and strategy for 2+ years, the day I delegated the majority of that work, and now almost all of it, outside of the odd thing here and there, my life really. That's one of the most interesting. I can't wait for someone to do a study on social media managers over the past 10 years or 15 years in a couple years, because people don't realize the umbilical cord that exists between managing accounts and really understanding them, not doing a half-ass job, but really understanding like the analytics and understanding why things are being done. And how that kind of ties you to a machine. Maybe you're not at a cubicle, but you got to be by a screen to be able to do stuff and analyze things. So that, though, I think we're developing, and I'm seeing this just by virtue of my work. There's systems that you can actually put in place now that allow people to allow yourselves, businesses to use social media organically, and not have it be a time suck, have it be something that is truthfully like overwhelming them just by virtue of having to do it. But I think, one of the first things that's important if you're feeling overwhelmed by something is the concept of space and creating space for yourself. This is kind of a classic mindfulness meditation concept that, by observing your thoughts and making time to kind of sit down and not even observing them, but just trying to sit and focus on your breath, you realize how many thoughts you're having right off the bat, which most people is very overwhelming for a lot of people. But also over time, you get to see that you don't have to react to every thought you have. You don't have to pursue every thought. So you get a bit of space in between, which can be beneficial in any number of ways, but especially in the professional world, that concept of space is really important because you're not as effective if you're stressed out and if you're overwhelmed. If you had time to easily brainstorm or think of strategy sessions and do the stuff that really motivates and energizes you, then you're going to be doing a better job for everyone you work with.
Dude, I just got to start turning my phone off for a couple hours a day. Like even right now, just having
the phone off. Do you have push notifications for your email?
Yeah.
Oh, no, turn that off. Turn that off. Just turn it off.
But I mean,
make yourself at least do it so you can see how often you do it.
Yeah.
But turn it off. Don't get notifications.
Just you only go when you go to open up your email and get shit done.
Even if you sit there with it open all day, if you do a good job, you don't even need filters because people won't hit you up to do stuff because you're handling what you want to be handling and what you need to handle, and you've set that up. Your business won't crumble. You have like a successful business. Someone else is posting an Instagram link, still going to generate sales.
I wonder what's going to the way that we communicate has evolved so quickly and such like there's so many different ways, like there's so many outlets, so many social media outlets and text message and phone calls and voicemails and video calls and blah, blah, blah. It's like, I wonder what's going to be the next revolution of communication. Like,
I feel like it's probably going to be something in VR, but I think it's still people. That's the important thing to remember. Whatever tool we use to communicate, and no matter how transcendent it is in terms of visual or whatever, it's still just people, and that's the stuff that works. From the people who are doing email lists to the people who are getting on the phone and to people going out and talking to people, like it's still people. Like this, to bring it back to the first thing we're talking about, that's why I think people vote for certain candidates, is because they represent someone who is like them, or at least represents what they believe in. So that's ultimately
how do we use our thoughts to make people vote?
Oh, well, that's a good question. That's a great question. I think the question there would be is why would you want to even do that? And I guess the obvious answer would be, well, because we know that this is going to be better. But I think that when it comes to all social action, including political action, the best thing you can do, in my experience, could be wrong, is start with yourself.
Yeah.
There's a classic example of someone who's on MindPod Network, this podcast network, Ram Dass. He says, like, if you've ever gone to a peace rally and noticed how many angry people there are, just like screaming, peace, peace, peace. And he's like, that is one way to do it. But you should, of course, engage in social activism. But if you don't have your own shit straight first, what are you bringing to the world?
Yeah, true,
what are you maybe not consciously, like if we talk about how much we don't know, then we have to be open to the possibility that we're bringing so much stuff. This is also a Carl Jung thing. He talks about the shadow and projection. It's a Freudian thing too. You're projecting. But people commonly believe that their shadow side, the stuff about themselves that, they may not like or they maybe think are bad, or society, whatever it is, people have a very good, proficient at projecting that out to other people. Oh, well, that person is like that. These people are like that. That's just a common thing that's happened. And you can see in politics how people can kind of, oh, we got him now. But I think that's a really important thing, is rather than trying to influence other people's mindset, or what they're even voting for, is just start with yourself, because it's a practical, doable thing. Yeah. And you'd be surprised if you use your mind thought changing stuff on yourself, you can then maybe even do some real big change like that. And that's, I think, how people do it, truthfully. I think that's how people like Martin Luther King, I think that's what he did. I think he understood some essence, some universal essence of what was going on, and focused and galvanized and created a system, like a tribe initially, that sprouted because it made sense, and he was representative of it as a whole. So I think anyone can do that, truthfully. I definitely believe that. All right, so we're going to end it now, and we'll definitely have you on again. This is awesome. There's so many other things we didn't even get to talk about, but yeah, enjoyed it. So I'm going to ask you the last question I ask every guest, which is, what are some practical tips or things that have helped you in your life? Like, this could be something you do or something or whatever. Just what has helped you in your life, kind of, helped.
Help me, like,
as a person.
God, man, I should have thought about this before I got
That's what everyone says, but it's okay. You don't have to. It's what
man, I mean, it's like, I really, like, I'm a very creative person. I'm like really, and I'm also super distracted, right? Just recently, I've realized the importance of exercising all the time. And that's ridiculous that it's taken me this long. But like just recently, especially with like yoga and a little bit of cardio, like right now, like today I did it. I'm realizing now that anytime I have to do anything where I want to like speak well or represent myself positively, I need to work out, especially because of my like crazy creative and like distracted and fast moving mind. It slows me down and allows me to like be a little bit more level headed. So I just like, especially because it's happened to me recently, that's the first thing that came to mind, or at least the epiphany.
That's a good one, man.
And the problem is I've known that for a long time. I've just like now realized the importance of it because I'm getting old.
Yeah, well, I think that's something that does it from the physical side for a lot of people. I totally agree. I started taking walks like about a month and a half ago, like long, vigorous walks with my dog, and it's great. It's just great. It gets energy out. Getting your heart rate going can just really, I totally agree. That's a good one. That's a good one.
And then, I mean, really on like the other side, it's I guess it's not even like a tip, but like basically I've always had this like mantra, and I've been saying it recently. Like I want people to create more stuff instead of like, and this isn't even like a tip on how to do your life, but I think people should not be scared to put themselves out there like that. And not so many people that I'm friends with like constantly are, Facebook, that's what Facebook is about sharing something else somebody else created. Like they constantly, like personally, I want to create way more than I consume. When that becomes content or anything, like I think it's really important to not just listen to hip hop, to make hip hop, like not
Sure.
just watch
I love
movies, but to make movies. You know,
Well,
And-
because you also believe what's implicit in that is that people are capable of doing
Yeah.
that. A lot of people don't think that they're capable of creating things. Period.
yeah,
It's wrong in my estimation.
No, of course.
Totally
And
wrong.
even if it sucks, but it's just like super enjoyable to like
Yes.
really like. That's the best part of creating something. I mean, you know this. You make music and
Yeah.
stuff, right? Right. Like you make something and then you like listen back to it, or you like see people's reaction to it, and it's
amazing.
like, it's fucking cool.
Yeah.
There's something really behind it, and that's like that would be just the advice. It's not like a tip, really. It's just like if you're scared, like just do it.
Just
man.
do it.
Just do it, man.
All right. So your tip is Nike.
Basically,
Yeah,
you're
awesome,
right.
awesome.
Right. I mean, I'm almost like saying that to myself because I'm
Sure.
like frustrated with like I, you know, every time I put myself out there,
Yeah.
you know, I'm happy with the results.
Yeah.
And like, you know, self-doubt, and also I think like weed, this is one of the negatives. Weed does cause self-doubt, but like
Sure.
the self-doubt of like, wait a minute, I don't want to do this because I'm going to look stupid. I don't want to do this because
Yeah.
it's this, blah, blah, blah. Just pull the fucking trigger. Nobody cares. Even if you
That's the
look stupid,
truth.
nobody gives a shit. Like
It's
it just,
the worst that's gonna happen is no one's gonna pay any attention, and you shouldn't feel bad because I can tell you just doing digital marketing and strategy, like it's hard to get heard if you don't know how to do that specifically.
we did a I know we're supposed to end, but let me just
Yeah.
we did a Bigfoot sighting video
Yeah,
for
I
Meister,
saw that.
right?
I
And
liked
it's
it.
stupid as hell. It's so dumb. I mean, it was embarrassing, and that was the type of thing. Like we made it, and then I waited like 3 months. I was like, I don't even want to put this out. This shit is mad dumb. But then I put it out. It's been the most effective video
Yeah.
of any video we've ever made,
Yeah.
right? And it's the same deal. Like you just got to put yourself out there, man, and like really pursue your ideas, man. Like I guess I kind of, I can be a good example of that because I've like had a crazy idea and made it work, and it became a successful company. And it was really like there's no secret other than just
doing it.
getting to it and like
Yeah.
putting yourself out there, not being scared by what people are gonna say or
I
the
love it.
haters.
The haters. So don't pay attention to the haters.
The cliche word, the haters, but you just don't worry about that shit, man. Just
Yeah,
go
man.
hard. Go
Awesome.
hard.
Well, thank you for coming on. This has been really, really great.
Thanks for having me, man. It was
Yeah.
really enjoyable.
Cool. Thank you for coming to Sony. Enjoy the show. That was like a movie thing they did at the movies. Was it Sony? Was it Lowe's? I don't know, but I liked it and it always stuck in my head. So now I do it sometimes. That was a good episode, right? I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. I assume if you're listening at this point and hearing this, you must have not hated it. So yeah, next I did FYI. I've recorded this week alone 4 or 5 podcasts. So I have a huge kind of backlog of guests. So stay tuned. Some really, 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 really cool and interesting people coming up, who I think you people will all enjoy. My talking is not is not so great today. But thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next week.